Donald Trump Jr. We will ask him every single question I can think of on this topic. Don Jr., good to see you. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
Appreciate it.
I didn't know there was any time left.
I've been told that before, but they're highly rated opening monologues.
I like it.
And I figured while I have a captive audience, I wanted to get my points out to them. Let's start with the emails.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first email. First of all, let's talk about who is Rob Goldstone.
Rob Goldstone is a talent manager for Emin Argalov, who's a Azerbaijani Russian singer, performed at Miss Universe and later performed at the WGC Championship golf course tournament that we held at Doral.
All right, so do you know?
I met him through the golf course. I wasn't even at the Miss Universe pageant, but I met him throughout there, so I had a casual relationship
with him. Okay, so he sends you this email. We'll put it back up on the screen and give you a chance to look at this. This is the one that says the Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, meaning Emin's father, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with documents, information that could incriminate Hillary Clinton, etc. Obviously highly sensitive information, but as part of Russia and its government support of Mr. Trump. And then they asked the best way to handle this. This email comes in. What are you thinking?
Honestly, my takeaway when all of this was going on is that someone has information on our opponent. You know, things are going a million miles an hour. You know what it's like to be on a campaign. We just won Indiana, but we're talking about a contested convention. Things are going a million miles an hour again. And, hey, wait a minute. I've heard about all these things, but maybe this is something. I should hear them out.
Okay. When you read the parts about the Russian government or Russia supporting your father, did that put off any sirens in your head?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think this was, again, just basic information that was going to be possibly there. I didn't know these guys well enough to understand that if this talent manager from Miss Universe, you know, had this kind of thing. So I wanted to hear him out and play it out and see what happens. But, you know, people are trying to reach out to you all the time with this.
All right. So you spent a lot of time talking about it, and you actually said at one point that, hey, if it turns out to say what you say it is.
Of course.
What did you think it might be?
Listen, I'd been reading about scandals that people were probably underreporting for a long time. So maybe it was something that had to do with one of those things. I mean, this was her perhaps involvement with the Russian government. So, you know, again, I didn't know there was any credibility. I didn't know if there was anything behind it. I can't vouch for the information. You know, someone sent me an email. I can't help what someone sends me. You know, I read it. I responded accordingly. And if there was something interesting there, I think it's pretty common.
What about the timeline of this? This is pre, for example, WikiLeaks and the DNC
honestly,
emails.
This is pre, like, Russia fever. This is pre-Russia mania. You know, this is 13 months ago, before I think the rest of the world was talking about that, trying to build up this narrative about Russia. So I don't even think my sirens, you know, went up, or the antennas went up at this time because of it, because it wasn't the issue that it's been made out to be over the last, you know, 9 months, 10 months, since it really became a thing. So I think there is an element of context to that. At the time, it wasn't this big news story.
All right. What did you know about Emin's father? What did you know about them from Moscow? Was it just the pageant you met them at?
They
and
had the pageant, and they're
concert?
successful real estate developers over there. So, you know, that's the extent of, you know, my knowledge with them. I'd met Emin once or twice, and, you know, maintained a casual relationship there. Talked about some potential deals, and that's about the extent of it. They really didn't go anywhere.
What do you know about this Russian lawyer? What did you at the time, if anything, know?
I actually didn't know anything about it. Again, an acquaintance, you know, sent me this email as a courtesy to him. I said, okay, let's meet. But I didn't know who I was meeting beforehand, never heard of the person, never got the information until they were in the room.
At any point were you told, either in a phone conversation or otherwise, what they might tell you, what Goldstone seemed to be implying you would receive?
No, as I recall, it was all basically this email coordination. Let's try to set up a meeting and see what happens, and that it was going to be interesting information. And, you know, in the end, it wasn't about that at all.
Let's go into the meeting. All right, so you meet at Trump Tower.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting was described earlier today on the Today Show. Did she describe it accurately?
I think fairly accurately. I mean, I was a little taken back by her saying, you know, talking about me pressing for the information. But as you can see from the emails, the pretext of the meeting was, hey, we have information. And there was, you know, some small talks. I don't even remember what it was. It just was sort of nonsensical, inane and garbled, and then quickly went on to, you know, a story about Russian adoption and how we could possibly help. And really, that's where we shut it down, which is, wait a second, what does this have to do with
Did you even know what the McGinty Act was?
I'd never even heard of it before, you know, that day. You know, I think it became pretty apparent to, you know, Jared and Paul, who I think Jared left after a few minutes. Paul got in his phone.
She said that, yeah.
Yeah, this is
you
her
remember
account.
Paul
I do remember that. Yeah, we were all there. I was basically sitting there listening as a courtesy to my acquaintance who had set up the meeting. And, you know, in his own words, you can hear what he said, and you played it earlier. about it. I mean, he apologized to me walking out of the meeting, basically for wasting my time.
Well, and he did say at the end of your statement today, you did point out, as Goldstone said today, the entire meeting was the most inane nonsense I've ever heard, and I'm actually, agitated by it.
Yeah, listen.
And he called and apologized to you?
There wasn't really follow-up because there's nothing there to follow up. But as we were walking out, he said, listen, I'm sorry for that. But I think what happened, he sort of goosed up. He built up. There was some puffery to the email, perhaps to get the meeting, to make it happen. And, in the end, there was probably some bait and switch about what it was really supposed to be about. And so, there is nothing there.
So she is saying that she had no information to provide. Do you remember, but she's suggesting that you were pressing her a little bit for information?
I imagine I did. I mean, I was probably pressing because the pretext of the meeting was, hey, I have information about your opponent. It was this, hey, some DNC donors may have done something in Russia and they didn't pay taxes. I was like, what does this have to do with anything? Especially in light of everything that was out there. I was like, this isn't.
Did you ever have any contact with this woman again?
No.
Did you ever have any contact with Goldstone again?
Casual, hey, how's it going? Emin's going to be in town performing, something like that. But
did you ever see Emin again? Except I
don't believe so, no. I don't think I've seen Emin since this transpired.
Okay, so this is a hypothetical. In any point in your mind, did Don Jr. have a siren saying, okay, they're talking, again, I go back to the first email about Russia, Russian government, I'm meeting with this person, you were going to talk on the phone. Did you ever think, maybe this might not be?
Listen, I think, like I said, in retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research. They had something, maybe concrete evidence to all the stories I'd been hearing about, but they were probably underreported for, years, not just during the campaign. So I think I wanted to hear it out. But really, it went nowhere, and it was apparent that that wasn't what the meeting was actually about.
Okay, let me ask a hypothetical, and I know hypotheticals, maybe you've thought about it since this has now become Russia collusion, and et cetera. Did you ever meet with any other person from Russia that you know?
I don't even know. I've probably met with other people from Russia,
I mean,
but certainly
not
in the context of a formalized meeting or anything like that, because why would I? In the grand scheme of things, how busy we were, it was much more important to doing this. This was a courtesy to an acquaintance.
Let me play a montage, and these are Democrats attacking you today, and give you a chance to respond to what they're saying and what the left is saying. I mean, they have taken it to the ultimate extreme. And then I'll ask you about some perspective about some of my comments at the beginning of the show. Here's what they're saying.
We now know that through intermediaries, the Russian government sought to approach the Trump campaign to see whether they would be interested in damaging information about Hillary Clinton. We now know that the response that the president's son gave to the Russians was that he would love it if they would provide damaging information about Hillary Clinton. Rather than report this overture by the Russian government to provide damaging information to intervene in the presidential election in a way to help his father, neither the president's son nor the campaign reported this information to the FBI.
We get this email exchange today showing clear collaboration between the Russian government and Russian government agents and the Trump campaign at the highest levels, where the email is very clear that the Russian government is weighing in to help elect Donald Trump.
We need Donald Trump Jr. and other campaign associates to turn over any and all documents and electronic communications that investigators asked for. And we need public testimony under oath of Donald Trump Jr., who has changed his story repeatedly.
We're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
Schumer's asking, did you hand over any and all documents?
Well, I will. I've said it publicly. I said it yesterday. More than happy to cooperate with everyone. I just want the truth to get out there. I mean, that's part of why I released all the stuff today. I wanted to get it all out there. They're trying to drag out the story, in all fairness. They have it. They want to drip a little bit today, drip a little bit then. So I was like, here it is. I'm more than happy to be transparent about it, and I'm more than happy to cooperate with everyone.
So as far as you know, as far as this incident is concerned, this is all of it?
This is everything. This is everything.
Was anybody else at any point in the campaign said, oh, I've got information about Hillary that you remember?
No.
Let me go back to what Tim Kaine said. Well, if it is what you said you're at, especially, you'd want it released later in the summer. you think that's unusual for a campaign to want op research? And I'll get to the Ukrainian issue, which I think has been underreported, especially in light of this coverage. But
well, like I said, I think we had more important things to worry about. I wasn't sure of the credibility of any of this stuff. At the time, I'm sitting there, Indiana had just probably happened. You know, I'm worried about hearing a contested convention. So, you know, we're going to fight. This is the first time we've ever done any of this. This was, you know, I'm still way in the learning curve on all of this. So it wasn't that urgent to me if I'm saying, hey, it can wait till the end of summer. But yeah, obviously I want to hear the information. I mean, that's what we do in business. If there's information out there, you want it, and then you make what you do with it. If there was something that came from it that was shady, if it was a danger to national security, I would obviously bring it right to someone. But I didn't know what anything was. It turns out it was nothing. And therefore, there's nothing to be able to actually talk about.
The whole contact took how long? How long was the meeting?
Oh, 20 minutes or so.
About 20 minutes. And Jared left after 5 or 10?
Yes.
Like she said, and Paul Manafort was on his
phone
the whole time.
Pretty much. Listen, like I said, it became pretty apparent that this was not what we were in there talking about.
A lot of people are going to want to know this about your father. Mm-hmm. Did you tell your father anything about this?
No. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've got to take a break. We'll come back. We'll go back to Hannity. So shortly after the New York Times broke the report about Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lawyer last year, well, the Russia-obsessed media in the country went on the attack. Let's take a look.
Even if you accept his Sunday version, ask no questions, have no suspicions, he's in a world of hurt.
The president's son, according to this new reporting, was informed, hey, the Russian government has dirt on Hillary Clinton. And apparently the response to that was...
He was admitting that he had met with this Russian lawyer for the purpose of receiving information against Hillary Clinton. I thought, my God, this kid was dropped on his head. As a child, could he possibly be admitting this?
Pronounced stupid of Don Jr. I mean, I guess it runs in the family to go on Twitter when he is clearly in legal jeopardy.
This can't be dismissed as people out to get Donald J. Trump Jr. or fake news. This is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
And we continue with Donald Trump Jr. What's your reaction to that? They're saying you're colluding. It's a 20-minute, your reaction.
Listen, I think politics is a dirty game. We've seen the sides that they take. We've seen the commentary they've had on my father. You know, I think it's a little bit ridiculous and overplayed, and I think people are getting that. I think the media has really done themselves a disservice by picking sides so flagrantly. They've really driven people to actually have to think about it because it's just a tough game.
What about, did anyone on your team, I guess you have a staff of people that work for you, did anyone research the lawyer or anybody involved in this?
No, well, again, we didn't know who it was before the meeting.
You didn't know who the woman was, right?
No, we didn't know who she was before the meeting. You know, apparently she was a prosecutor in Moscow who hasn't done that since 2002. Mm-hmm. So, you know, 14 years ago at the time of the meeting, she was a prosecutor. And it was such a nothing. I literally wouldn't have remembered the meeting, especially when you think about it in the grand scheme of all the things.
Out of the meeting?
What's that?
Were you annoyed based on?
I was a waste of time. But again, you know, sometimes you do things differently for acquaintances and for friends.
Let me ask a hypothetical. And I hate hypothetical questions, but I think it's relevant in this case. Mm-hmm. If the meeting resulted in information that you felt in any way was illegal mm-hmm. or compromising or collusion, to use the media's term,
I said it earlier, 100% I would bring it to the proper authorities. So there's nothing that I would do to ever endanger this country. I think the reason we fought so hard during this campaign, whether it was my father and the work that he put into it, whether it was the rest of our family and the efforts that we put into it, and you know those efforts well, it's because we'd do anything for this country. So we're never going to put that in jeopardy, ever.
So this, as far as you know, are all the emails that exist on this case, and you don't think there's any other one?
Which I do not think there's anything else. We've scoured it thoroughly just to be sure, but there isn't anything else there.
All right, and there was no follow-up. I think this is important. No follow-up with any of them. Never heard from the woman again.
It was such a nothing. There was no reason to follow up. It was a waste of time.
All right. Did you learn about the adoption issue when you were there? Did that?
Well, again, I think I gave him a little bit of time as a courtesy, so I probably heard whatever I heard in the room. But you know, it's a big issue for a lot of people, I guess. But if this wasn't a campaign talking point, this wasn't something we were, this was not something I was going to worry about at that stage. I mean, we had a lot of bigger fish to fry. And that's what I was focused on.
When we come back, I want to address the media coverage, the issue of the Ukrainian story that I brought up, and whether you think there's a double standard, and the treatment of your family by the media. We've got all the tape you'd ever want and much more. We'll continue with Don Jr. Back to Hannity as we continue our final moments with Donald Trump Jr. All right. At the beginning, look, this is an opinion show, but I wanted to ask every question I could think of regarding this issue. I can't think of any more, in all honesty. But I did bring up this issue of the Ukrainians working with the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. I also talked about a lot of other issues, the V15 group that Obama's operatives and taxpayer dollars went to defeat Bibi. If going after foreign countries' elections is so bad. Very little media coverage. Real crimes have been committed in this country. I would argue Hillary Clinton destroying emails, mishandling, destroying them. I would argue Hillary Clinton, the Uranium One deal, and $100 million plus kicked back to her. Comey, we know it's classified information, and we know a violation of the Records Act. Loretta Lynch's meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac. 125 leaks from the deep state in 126 days. The media that's watching this now never told the American people about the Ukrainian story, except for Politico, to their credit, and a few others, not many. What is your reaction to the double standard?
Listen, I think, the double standard is upsetting. I mean, you see it every day. I mean, we tune in, obviously. We were probably junkies before, and now it's a lot harder to not take it personally, and you try to do it. And, I'd love to rant and rave about it, but candidly right now, with everything that's going on, I think that people see it. I think they're starting to get it. And I think the mainstream media has probably done themselves, a pretty big disservice by going so far, by going so extreme, by being so sensational. And I think it's pushing regular people away because they want to see what my father campaigned on. They want to see jobs. They want to see the numbers that he's putting up. The stock market keeps breaking hits. We have the all-time highest employment in the country in terms of overall numbers. All these things, that he promised he would do, they're happening. They're actually happening. And that's not getting any coverage. And that's a real shame. That's a real disservice to the people of this country.
Well, I agree with you, and I agree. I think the forgotten men and women is something that I talked about last night. Obviously, Robert Mueller announced earlier tonight he's going to be looking into it. You said in a tweet you would fully cooperate with any investigation.
Of course.
Completely.
100%.
Turn over everything that they want, and you feel you already have.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you have nothing to hide. You want to be, and that means you'll testify under oath, all of that.
All of it.
Yeah. Any other issue, your sister was attacked. I could play montages of that.
Yeah.
Joe Scarborough calls your father a schmuck, a goon, a thug. That's NBC's coverage. You've got the severed head issue. You've been attacked. It seems like one by one they try to pick off anyone around the president. Why do you think there's this reaction that is so almost like there's so many groups so opposing your father? Why do you think this? I've never seen it in all the years I've covered politics.
I think we're just so far away from the political elite. Whether you were on one side or the other, you were still part of that group. There was never necessarily consequences for inaction and for doing things, their way. So I think when you come from so far out, look at the attacks on Ivanka. I was pretty vocal about that stuff this weekend. If she was anyone else's daughter, she'd be a feminist icon, one of the most, just this incredible, brilliant, well-spoken woman. And they try to belittle her at every chance. It's really sad. And, again, for me as a family member, as her brother, as her older brother, you do take it personally. And it does make you want to fight back. And that's, perhaps what we are, is we are fighters. And they don't take well to that either, because most people don't like being called on their stuff.
My last question, one of the things you said tonight, maybe not so Trumpian, I guess, in the sense, although I do think your father and you are a lot alike, you said in retrospect.
Yeah.
Explain that with a little bit more detail.
Listen, again, I think I probably know more now. I think in the grand scheme of the hysteria that's been talked about, over the last 8, 9, 10 months with Russia, things are probably different than they were 13 months ago. And yeah, there were a couple people talking about it, and they just sort of, launched this notion. It's